Welcome, everybody, to another edition of Coffee and Open Source, a place to meet some new friends, have some great conversations, and maybe learn something on the way. I'm your host, Isaac Levin. And if you're enjoying the conversations here, be sure to like, subscribe, follow if you're watching or listening. Also, if you or someone you know would like to come on the show and have a chat with me, you can find me on the social media platform that you're on. And if you're on a lot of them like me, then the easiest way to find them is if you go to isaac.r11.com. You'll see all the places that I'm at. All right, with that out of the way, I don't get an opportunity very much to chat with people that I'm very impressed by, especially their online presence and all the things they do. And I'm just looking forward to having a longer conversation with them and kind of learning about how they got started and what they're working on. So my guest today is Gerald Versluis. Is that good? Is that good? Ish?
That's very
Ah,
good, very good.
it,
And way to put the pressure on, man. Something you look up to. Oh my
yeah.
goodness.
Well, I mean, I try. Do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, Joe?
I want to introduce myself. My name is Gerald Versluis. Close enough. I live in the Netherlands and I work for Microsoft as a software engineer, completely remote on the .NET team and specifically on the .NET MAUI team. And like Isaac already said, I'm also out there. I love being in the community. I already did that before I joined Microsoft as a Microsoft MVP, and even before a Microsoft MVP, doing sessions, writing blogs, being out there on social media, helping people on Stack Overflow back when that was a thing. Too soon. All these things. I just love being out there doing these kinds of things, talking to people, and hopefully paying a little bit of my privilege and my luck forward to other people who are kind of in the same position and I want to move ahead in the world. How do I do
Yeah.
that? I don't know how I got here. So there you go.
Well, I have a feeling I know roughly how you got there, but I think I'd love to kind of get started with how you got started. Like, when did you realize technology was the thing for you? Like, was there a particular inflection point, or you just kind of always were around technology and you just enjoyed it?
I mean, I'm a very boring middle-aged white guy. I'm middle-aged now. Oh my goodness, I'm so old. But I have all the privilege here in the Netherlands. We have a good education system, et cetera, et cetera. Um, and from a young age, I'm turning 40 this year.
Same, me too. Me too. I'm
So
turning 40 in July.
there we
Yeah, yeah.
go. Oh, there you go. You're ahead of me. I'm in September,
Okay.
so let me know how it goes. um, and at an early age, it was not like it is now, right? Like with mobile phones and everywhere, there were computers, and we were one of the first people to have them. And of course, like that has some. I see it with my kids now. I have two young boys; they're 6 and 8, and the screen. It attracts them. It's like flies. It attracts them. It's like I need to see it. I need to have it.
Yeah.
And that's what happened to me, I guess. But I like to think I took it a little bit further and not just like playing the games, but also like I needed to know how it worked. I was tinkering with actual machines, like with the actual hardware, not just the software as I do now. So I took computers apart, I built them. I wanted to know how it worked. I recall very vividly that I was like, you had the magazines back then, the paper magazines that you could buy at the store, and they would distribute like CDs with them. So that was like, hey, Linux. I got some whiff of Linux, and I was like, oh, that sounds interesting. That sounds cool. So there was a magazine with a CD and that had Linux on. So I tried to install that and totally failed until it worked, and I was like, wow, this is magic. This is amazing. So always tinkering with that kind of stuff. And then at some point, I needed to, how education works here. It's like you start with primary school, then high school, basically. And then after high school, you already have to kind of like decide what direction you're going to take for your professional life. So it's like, do you want to do something with art? Do you know want to do something? Do you want to become a doctor? Do you want to, you already have to pick kind of like a direction that you want to go. And obviously for me, it was like, hey, something with tech, something with IT. And I kind of like started out as kind of like the system administrator stuff. So actually building machines, building networks. I have some Cisco certificate somewhere, so I know that
Somewhere.
stuff as well. Somewhere. And then at some point I was like, hey, software engineering, that sounds pretty cool. So got into that, rolled into that. And that was actually at the time that .NET came out as a framework. And I did some other things, definitely. I had some dabbling with C++, some Java. Of course, like I feel that we all kind of like started with PHP, JavaScript, like
Sure.
the web
Yeah.
technologies, right? We built our first websites. But then what kind of like really stuck at college back then was .NET. And yeah, that's I did a little bit of Delphi when I started working my first job after college, but they were already kind of like, we know this is on its way out, so we want to be with .NET. And then after 3 years of working there, I was like, I know I want to go full .NET and C Sharp and all those things. So stuck with that, and here we are.
Yeah, I mean, I think you and I, like, we just found out, like, I have a level 39 shirt on because this is what I got for my
Ah,
birthday last
good.
year, right? Like, obviously we're a similar age, so I think we were introduced to technology at a similar time, right? Like, I remember very much like MySpace pages and being able to customize them, and the web being such a big
Yeah.
thing. Like,
Yep.
you know, obviously you have a tinkerer's mentality. And what I love to ask people that have that tinker's mentality, like, where do you think it comes from? Like, were your parents genuinely like, hey, Gerald, just play with this toy and figure out how it works? Like, or were you just one of those people that had to know, like, how things worked all the time?
No, I think I was one of the people that had to know. Like my parents are not technical at all. So they noticed that I took an interest, and they did everything they could to kind of like provide me with the toys to kind of
Sure.
like look into that. But and my father definitely was interested in the gadgets and whatnot, but not to an extent that I was. For like, I want to know how it works. He was mainly just like, oh, this is pretty, this is fun, I want to use it, and that's it, right? And then I would take it a step further with like, oh, I want to know how it works. I want to do it. And I very much remember um, we had a computer. It was like a 386. How do you call these?
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, you know what I mean. And it didn't have a hard drive. Imagine people,
Sure.
young listeners, young watchers. There was no hard drive, so you had to boot it up with like the 5-inch floppies, right? So you had the flexible ones. Had to put that in to boot the OS, which was DOS. Then it was booted up, and then we put in the floppy for Police Quest from Sierra. And that was like, that's basically how I learned English, right? Because that it's even like impossible to explain these days what type of game it is, but they're amazing, and I wish someone brought them back. I think it's described as point and click, although you couldn't even point back then. But with the keyboard, you could move around a couple of pixels. That
Yeah.
was your character, and then you had to type commands in English, like look at this thing, pick up this thing, open the door, and then you could, go through a whole thing. And it was Police Quest, which was kind of like police themed, and you were a police officer and had to do all these things. Um, but I knew enough, but just barely, and I was like, okay, I want to load the game that I saved last time. And I was like, I did no save, so I was like, okay, went to the menu and did save, and it wasn't working. Went to the menu and go to, and my father was so mad because I was overwriting his saves and he lost all his progress. So that's one of the first things that I remember. Um, Clashing over technology.
Sure.
No, but it was fun times. And then it was like, I was wondering like, why does it need to boot up through a floppy? What does it do? Where does it go? Like, does this work? What does it add if you put a hard drive in there, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, tinkering all over. And that's kind of like interesting to me with people now is there is when I started working, there was already a whole bunch of people um, who just went straight to software engineering, which fair enough. But they don't know. I don't know how it's with you, but they don't know about like the network stack and
Oh,
how all
sure.
of that work hardware wise. Um, which I found very helpful that I did know it whenever I was building stuff, right? Like if I would see some HTTP blah 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 exception, I was like, oh yeah, I know why that is, right? Like on a network level, and other people would be like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know this stuff, right? So that's always kind of funny to me, and I feel that has been very helpful to me to kind of like know the whole stack from end to end.
Yeah, I think that I think there's a couple of rules of thought, right? Where, I think there's value in knowing a level or maybe two levels below what you work on. But I think that and you can attest to this because of the store of stuff you work on. There are so many like things you need to know about in the current tech landscape, even at your own level. Like, thinking about people that are building things with .NET MAUI, which is like a cross-platform application model, right? It's like you got to know how like Android works, you got to know how iOS works, you got to know how, and yes, the frameworks help in a lot of regards, but you still need to have like active knowledge of these things, right? So like, yeah, the understanding of how like networking works or how memory management works, like those things are very important. The frameworks have tried to abstract as much of it as possible, but I think it's still valuable. One of the things I do find interesting too And I don't know if you've ever been asked this question on an interview. It's like, how does the internet work? Right?
Hmm.
Like if you were to ask
Yep.
somebody like that has only built like spa apps, right? They've
Yeah.
only built like,
Yeah.
React,
Yeah.
Vue, Angular. If
Exactly.
you were to
Yep.
ask them like how does the internet work, maybe they know, probably
Yeah.
they don't know, right? And I always question like, is that a good or bad thing?
Yeah. Kind of goes both ways. Yeah, absolutely. I see what you're saying. It definitely makes for some creative solutions, I guess, like both ways, right? Like if you do know what it's about, then you might start fiddling with like the connectors and the thing, and you're like, oh no, something has to be wrong here, and then another from their point of view, it must be something else technical, right? So you all bring something to the table. I'm definitely not saying that one is
Yeah.
good or bad, but I always definitely felt the benefit of knowing everything that's going on from not just stopping at my computer, but also like what goes through the wire and kind of
Yeah.
like what goes on there. But
So because of that, do you kind of see yourself as like, like a breadth learner or a depth learner? Because I think that there's, I don't know very many
oh,
people that do both very,
mm-hmm,
very well, right? Like they can
mm-hmm,
go
mm-hmm.
across a bunch of different disciplines and then go really, really deep. I think there's kind of, the people that know a lot about one thing or know a little bit about a lot of things.
Yeah, I definitely think I am more the generalist. Like I know a lot about a lot of stuff. And then whenever something needs to go really, really deep or whatever, I also notice about myself that whenever there's something new to build or explore or whatever, I can get very excited about that. And then whenever, it's kind of like set up and it's kind of like more maintenance mode or whatever, then I'm kind of like bored with it and I want
Yeah.
to move on to the new thing. So yeah, I definitely feel that I feel a fall in kind of like the broader knowledge bucket there.
Yeah. I find, I struggle with this too, like open source projects and talking about open source in general, right? Like, like your thing is like once it's gotten to a point where you don't think there's anything else that needs to come, like I feel the same way where I get bored.
Yeah.
Like, okay, like I can't even put in or like a repo. I'm not really looking at this anymore. Right. So if you're opening an
Hmm.
issue, I'm sorry. So how do you manage that? Like, because you've created a ton, like you work on large open source projects, right? It's like, what is the balance between like what is done to you and what is there's room for improvement?
Yeah, that's definitely an interesting question, and ooh, that's a loaded question. So there's of course like the repositories that I have to work on for work.
Sure. Yeah.
I work at Microsoft and I have to maintain .NET MAUI, but luckily everything I do, like also with it's not for nothing that I'm here now at like 8 p.m. my time talking to you, right? Like I love this stuff. I've always loved it, and I hopefully will always love it. So I don't even see it at work. It kind of like all blurs together. Is this a hobby project? Is this work? It all kind of like supports because I've mostly like I just said, like it's been C# .NET, and then at some point I was like, oh, I like mobile devices. There were suddenly mobile devices, and I immediately fell in love with like iOS and iPhone, which is atypical if you're doing C# and .NET, I guess. But I was like, I want to build apps for that, and then as I do, I can do things kind of like halfway. So I went out, bought an iMac, brought it home, put it down, and I was like, I'm gonna do Objective C, and then I started Xcode,
Yeah.
and I was like, this is very different than what I know.
Sure. Yeah.
This sucks. So then I started looking into other things, and luckily at that time, Xamarin came around, and then I kind of like stuck with Xamarin and now .NET MAUI, and it even landed me a job at Microsoft, being paid to do what I love. So I'm very passionate about that stuff. And some other things left and right, but this kind of like stuck. So it's not like that's what I wanted to come to. Like it's not that I feel like I have to, but that's
Yeah.
definitely my job. So that's the thing that I can't be like, oh, I don't feel like it, I'm not going to do it. But besides that, I have all kinds of projects that typically support Maui, but also definitely outside of that, like the broader .NET ecosystem. And most of those is either coming from a place of I want to learn more about this thing, or I just see a gap and I need something because I've always been building apps on the side with all of this as well, which has hugely benefited, I feel, our product because, whenever I hit something, I also have the knowledge and power to like go out and fix it, and then fix it for everyone. So I think it's very helpful, and lots of people on our team are doing that to kind of like also build app with the technology that we're building so that we can see the things that our customers are seeing, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, together with that, like you're saying, like, hey, at some point you kind of like get bored, or at least the plugin or the library or whatever you have is up to a level where I got what I needed from it. So it's like, this is what I needed. I have a calendar store plugin for .NET MAUI, so I can read and write the appointments into the calendar stores for these devices. And I only needed kind of like this level to do it, and it's done, right? If you open an issue, maybe I'll look at it if it's like something simple. If you open a PR, I'm always happy to review it because, if you put into time to spend your time on something that I build and we can make it better, I'm always happy to do that. But if it's like an issue with like, hey, this thing is not working, and also there, it's kind of like, if it's someone I know and trust, then it's like also completely different than some random people, some
Sure.
random person
Yeah.
who is like a one-liner, it doesn't work, fix it. Like I can't work with that, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, it definitely comes down to, I guess, a lot of factors. And on the other consuming side, it's like you need to get lucky, if I
Yeah.
look at it or not.
Yeah, I mean, well, I think too, and somebody in the chat there, they asked about, or they just had a comment about, hobby projects distinct from what you do at work. And I think it's really, really important from like a learning perspective, because let's be
Yeah.
real, if like, and you have a different story because you work at a company that builds like developer tools and developer frameworks. So you touch a lot of things. But if you work at a more typical like job, like you work at a bank or you work at, a real estate company or whatever it is, right? You might not have the opportunity to like work on like quote unquote like new things. So how do you learn, right? And the question I have for you is like, how do you stay up to date? Because like, let's be real, like for a lot of people, like, how do I stay up to date? Well, I watch Gerald. Like, I look at what Gerald's doing. So like, my question is like, how does Gerald stay up to date?
Who's my Gerald? I look at
Yeah,
James
who's my
Montemagno.
yeah,
Good.
well, yeah. Well, that's it. Well, who does James look up to? Oh, well, James looks up to like it's like turtles all the way up, right? And then
Yeah,
eventually
yeah,
there's like
yeah.
some person who just maybe it's
Make
Hanselman,
stuff
maybe
up.
it's whatever, right?
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, like how do you stay current and how do you like pay attention to what's going on in the tech world that's outside of your current
Um,
like work situation?
Yeah, yeah. So I do feel, just before we started the stream, you were asking me like, "Hey, were you a Microsoft MVP before?" And I was, and I felt that I had a bigger overview back then of what
Sure.
was going on, kind of like outside of my bubble. Because now I got pulled into Microsoft, and it's like .NET MAUI is my center of the universe. You need to work on that. And for the longest time, I was working. I was like, suddenly I work at Microsoft. How did I do this? I need to make this happen. So, I felt the pressure, imposter syndrome, all the things. Um, so for the longest time, I was like super busy with just that. And I was kind of like tunnel vision, only focusing on that, not really having much time to do anything else. But now, I got things more under control. I definitely over the years started to look outside again. Also, just, that's something that's good to do, that you have to do. Um, I'm close to the fire, right? Like at
Yeah.
least if I don't have the time to look at complete other stacks. Like I'm not going to look into what's new with Java or what's new with Go or Rust or whatever. Like I high over know what it does. But for the rest, like for the stuff that I'm interested in, I'm close to the fire at Microsoft, right? So, and I'm here now almost for 7 years, so I know a lot of people now. And I'm also working like, you climb through the ranks and you, as part of that, at least at Microsoft, how it works is that you also start working together with other teams, and then you automatically know a little bit like, hey, what are you doing? And you get more up to date, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm close to the fire. I see all the things even being developed like in real time, right? Like with the Aspire team. Aspire is a great example for this. Like I was here before Aspire was a thing, and then I've seen it kind of like built because one of our PMs, Maddie,
Yeah.
went from .NET MAUI to Aspire, and we were in a lot of touch, right? Like personally, but as well as professionally. So, we got close, got a lot of context. So I got also a lot from like how they were developing. Interestingly enough, there was some nice cross pollination um, with like, hey, she brought a lot of stuff that came from the .NET MAUI team that they were now implementing at the Aspire team. They were running into things, and it was like, oh yeah, we did that with the MAUI team. So they will pull you in and it'll be like, hey, how did you fix that back then, and how can we learn from that? So I'm close to the fire, lucky enough. And for the rest, I definitely feel that whoever that person was, like, yes, I feel whenever you're vaguely interested in something, at least that's how I learn. I figure out a project, whether it's useful or not, or whether it's ever going to be released or not, and you start hacking away at it. Forget about documentation, right? Like who reads those? You start working with it, and you kind of like start exploring what the thing is and how to work with it. Otherwise, like I feel I'm old. I was there before all the social media stuff. But if that's something for you, you can kind of like pull in all the content from there, right? Like just start following the people that are in your niche, in your ecosystem. They typically put out blogs or whatever. Start reading those, and the algorithm will pick up really quickly what you're interested in. And together with your cat pictures, you will also get
Yeah.
hopefully some useful content there. But yeah, I wish I had some kind of like silver bullet on,
Yeah.
hey, this is how you do it. I'm a very chaotic person, so I just go everywhere basically. But yeah, it's a mix of like the YouTube videos, blog posts coming through on social media, and just the stuff that I see in my daily job basically that comes by.
Yeah, and I mean, to your point, right? Like you get to see like a lot of stuff that's getting worked on before it gets announced, or you get to be a part of sort of the decision making process. And I think one of the things that I find the most interesting about some of the stuff that you work on is that there's this really tight collaboration between like people, I guess FTEs for people that don't know, that's like full-time employee, that's a Microsoft person, and like a community member, like somebody who's building or helping contribute to projects, right? So like I think of like Maui Community Toolkit, for instance, right? Where it's like this huge project that's literally I don't know if it's technically owned by Microsoft or not owned by Microsoft, but it's like built outside of like the Maui thing. And I think my
Yep.
question for you is like, what is that balance for you where it's like, oh, like I'm going to work on some community stuff, or I'm going to burn down like the list of issues or whatever I have that's a part of, I guess,
Yeah.
the more repos that you have, right? Like, how do you balance that?
Yeah. It's funny that you mentioned that. I also there, like I should probably I should care more maybe about my own career than maybe our customers.
I
That
think you're
sounds
doing
weird, right?
fine, Gerald. I think you're
But
doing fine.
no, absolutely. Like, don't get me wrong. I'm not complaining about I should be much further than I am right now. I'm in a very good spot. Don't worry about me. But it's more like, if I wanted to climb the ladder and make promotions, I should focus on the next cool thing, right? Like I probably should not have stayed at Maui for as long as I did. And I should be chasing like the next cool thing and make some big innovative, the next innovation, whatever. Probably jump on lots of AI, which I'm still doing now. But anyway, I could have made some different decisions. But I love this project again. And it will happen at times that I would be bored over the weekend and I'm always kind of like, um, see our list of issues, which is always kind of like a hot topic, like, oh, look at how many open issues there are. That's a bad indicator of how a project is doing. Like,
Yeah,
we're doing fine, and still there are like thousands of open issues. If you go look at like the .NET runtime, are you not using that? Because they have like 5,000 open issues,
sure.
right?
Yeah.
So it's there can be a number of reasons, but it would I know there was work to do, especially around like the .NET 6, 7, 8 timeframe. And then the other problem that we and the rest of the world has is like GitHub issues are a unstructured bunch of
Yeah,
data, right?
sure.
So how do you get through those? We would have a bunch of duplicates. We would have a bunch of things that are already fixed, blah, 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 blah. So it would definitely happen that whenever I would be bored, I would not doom scroll over social media, but I would open up our issue list and just go to a random page, go through it and be like, oh, this should be easy enough to fix. I think we already fixed that one. I already did this, right? Like, just to give you a little bit of an example, like how much I'm kind of like involved and again, like this is something that I like doing and I want to serve kind of like our customers because I'm on the other side, right? Like I've been there at the Xamarin time as a customer when also the times were kind of like, rocky, and the product was like, it could be in a better place. And then I felt the pain of like, what the heck is this team doing? And now I kind of like see the other side, and I see the priorities there. What was the question again? Oh, how do I kind of like find the balance and find priorities? Um, Sure. Like, we define priorities, so there's definitely, at least kind of like professionally for the product that I'm paid to work on, we'll identify based on feedback and whatnot, signals that we see, like, hey, this is the area that we need to give a little bit of extra attention, or that's something that we think is important. So we'll focus on our efforts on that. But Community Toolkit is a fun project, that kind of like originated also around Xamarin time. Actually, James Montemagno at some point started it, but then it was an empty repository. And then at some point, we knew that we were going to go into .NET MAUI. But it was still Xamarin Forms. And in Xamarin Forms 5, we introduced a couple of controls and concepts that were experimental. So they were behind an experimental flag. And it would be kind of like weird that the last version of Xamarin Forms that would freeze in time would still have experimental features. So what we did, we were like, how are we going to fix that? And then at that point, we kind of like came up with the Xamarin Community Toolkit. So we moved all the experimental stuff so that people could still use it, so we wouldn't break them, we wouldn't block them. And together with that, like, if you know a little bit about this ecosystem, then it uses XAML. And with XAML, you have like a lot of value converters and
Yeah.
all these kinds of things that people will write over and over and over again. Probably like 99% of the code looks the same, but they're everywhere. So we were like, we're just going to take all of those as well, like the most common ones, put those in this project too, and then people will just this one library that they need to install, and they will get all the things that they need to get started with a Xamarin product. And then at some point, of course, like, that evolves together with the main product to .NET MAUI, and more things kind of like came from that. But to your kind of like question remark, no, it is not owned by Microsoft. It's a project that runs completely on volunteers. There's multiple now. It kind of like started with the Windows Community Toolkit, and now there is also the Aspire Community Toolkit and some other ones. But there is typically always a Microsoft FTE, Microsoft employee attached, just to move things a little bit along. But technically, it just runs on people from the community that are not paid to do anything like that. And even like the Microsoft employee that is attached, like they do that in their own time,
Yeah.
right? So that's a project that just runs alongside that, just to support kind of like the main project and gauge some things, be an incubator for new functionality and stuff like that. Where do
Yeah.
you? I'll admit, like, how do you decide on priorities and things? Like I said, overall, you have bigger themes, bigger goals, things that you want to learn, maybe. But a lot of that also just putting out fires. Like, hey, something broke. We tried to implement this cool new thing. We broke something. We need to go fix it, right? That's just where it happens to.
Yeah. You said something interesting, like about, having like a repo having tons and tons of issues. Somebody told me years ago, and it really stuck with me. It's like the more issues that a repo has, the more successful it is, because of the fact that you have so many people that are using it and trying to find it to fit their problem. And if it doesn't work, right? So a repo that has 5,000 issues on it is a very successful repo, just because that shows you how many people are using it, right? And that's always stuck with me. One of the things that, since you do a good amount of community work and you build a product, right? I'm generally curious about this question. It's kind of spicy, so, you can dodge it as much as you want. It's like, obviously, as you build a framework, right? Like, you get signals from the community and your customer base about like what people are using and what they're not using. And sometimes you see things that are out there, whether the community generated or ideas that people have, and you think, oh, that should be part of the product. That should be something that we should
Yeah.
bring in as a part of the actual framework. So, go walk me through kind of the thought process of like, you see something out there in the world and you're like, oh, like a community is built around that. That's great. It should be part of the product. Like, what do you go through that process? Like, how does that actually work?
Yeah. So from the side of like, I'm someone that wants to contribute that to the framework, or I see something out there in the
Yeah,
wild and I
in
think
general,
it should be part of the
I
framework.
think it's kind of bi-directional, right? Like, maybe there's something, the dumb example, but maybe there's something in Maui Community Toolkit that you're like, this should really just be a part of the Maui framework.
Yeah.
right? Like, how do
Yeah.
you kind of
So
balance that? Because obviously it can go poorly. I think we've seen plenty of examples of that going poorly in tech,
yeah,
right?
sure.
But
Yep.
also, like, I think that a lot of people, and this is good, bad, or indifferent, want like the all-in-one solution where it's like, okay, I just want to be able to, .NET install workload
Yeah.
Maui,
Yeah.
and I want to like, I don't want to have to go and find 30 NuGet packages. Like, I just want my one thing, and it all works for me, right? Like,
Yep.
so what are your thoughts in that?
Lots of thoughts. The path through the community toolkit is easy-ish,
Yeah,
although
yeah,
it never really happened. I think it's happening now with one feature, because, like I mentioned, like back when it was Xamarin Forms, we had a couple of experimental controls, and they were experimental because they were there, but they were not quite at the level of quality that we were comfortable with releasing under kind of like the official support, et cetera, et cetera. So we moved them to the Xamarin Community Toolkit, where it's a little bit more of a, well, not a little bit more, it's just not a Microsoft product, period. So it doesn't have the same level of support, although a lot of people think that it is an actual Microsoft product. So some confusion there, but that's fine. But yeah, we definitely went in there with the idea, with the thought, with the knowledge that stuff that happens in the community toolkit might grow up to be a big boy feature in .NET MAUI. Right? So, like I said, it never really happened. I think it's happening now with some source-generated bindable properties. Doesn't really matter. Um, Also with the idea that there have been a good number of people, it's all open source, right? But what I'm
yeah,
doing mostly. So a lot of people will come and say like, oh, I want to contribute this thing to .NET MAUI. But it's like a big complex project, right? Even just pulling it down from GitHub, getting it to build, I think we're in a much better state now, but
sure,
that would take like a good amount of time to figure it if you don't know what you're doing, right? Um, Even me, like I contributed a couple of times before I worked at Microsoft, and it was like it was no fun. Um, so to kind of like lower that threshold, because I want to encourage as much people as possible to do that, because I, that I had a lot of fun with it, and it brought me a lot of where I am today. So I want to help people to do that, and to kind of like have a lower threshold, simpler project was also part of the plan for like the community toolkit. So that's a little bit easier, lower entry to kind of like get people on board. But I'm absolutely with those people, because I will read through the issues and I will see those features, and I'll be like, oh man, it sucks that this is not in the project, right? We
yeah,
need to have this. And then I go talk to people on the team, and they're like, no, no, no. Now, Gerald, you need to stop now. We can't do it all. And it's true. Like, we can't do it all. Where is the line? Hard to kind of like describe. You could see it like Maui is a UI framework mostly. So at some point, and this comes from the Xamarin history, we had Xamarin Essentials, which was
yeah,
a lot of
yeah,
like, because all the devices and all those platforms have APIs that are still available across all the platforms, right? Like a geolocation, push notification not in there, geolocation, I don't know, vibration, flashlight, accessing the file system. That's all stuff that you can do across all the platforms. So it would still be great to have a unified C#.NET API to do that, but it's not part of a UI framework, right? So that's kind of like where Xamarin Essentials was born. And now, because basically every Xamarin project would install Xamarin Essentials anyway. So with the transition to .NET MAUI, we basically said like, okay, let's just make it part of the thing, because also now we're like inside of .NET, right? So it's now just APIs that are inside of .NET that you can use. So I can't really get away with drawing the line with like, hey, it's a UI framework,
yeah,
so if it's not UI, it's not going to be in there. But for the rest, it's like typically it's like the more complex stacks, like push notifications. In theory, sound super easy, but super
no, not
complicated
not
to
not not
implement.
easy at all in all the different
Not easy at
platforms. Yeah,
all.
yeah,
And also, it's very hard to unify just because it's so tied to kind of like OS events that are so much different between the platforms. It's very hard to come up with a unified API that will actually help you. In fact, I think it will confuse you even more. So
yeah,
why even go there? Same with like Bluetooth, super hard to do. NFC, kind of like those APIs are super complex. There's lots of edge cases, lots of things that can go wrong. It's not that we don't want to do it, but that will, like you said, like, the number of issues that hopefully means that there is infinitely more people
Yeah.
that are using our product and working on this product. There will always be more of you than there will be more of us,
Sure.
else there's no product.
Yeah.
Um, and we can just not can do it all. So we try to focus on like the core, the basics, and we rely on a lot of the community, and there's a great community out there to do all these amazing libraries, or just do it yourself, right? Like it's easy to forget that that's something that a lot of people kind of like will do as well. Maybe the people who haven't learned the full network stack and just take the shortcut with software engineering. No, I'm kidding. But there's a whole bunch of people out there who will be like, "There's no library for it. I can't do it."
Yeah.
That's not how it works, right? A
Yeah.
library is just a piece of code, a wrapper, a thingy that someone did who actually did the work for you, right? To make your life easier. But there's nothing that those people did, or there's nothing that .NET MAUI does that you cannot do yourself,
Yeah.
right? If you're going to
Yeah.
build a .NET MAUI project, it's going to take you years. Please don't do that, but you could, right?
Yeah.
And everything in .NET MAUI gives you the technology that you need to still stay inside of C# and .NET. We have all the bindings for all the APIs on the platforms to go out to do those sensors, to do everything with Bluetooth. The libraries like Shiny from Alan Ritchie does an amazing job there. He at work. So for you, it's just one line of code, right? But if you go look at the project, it's like tens of thousands, maybe a lot, but it's thousands of lines of code, right? That's code that you could have written yourself. So
Yeah.
also keep that in mind whenever you go opening those issues and be like, it doesn't work. Blah, blah, blah. Someone is doing that for free, putting that out there so you don't have to figure out how to do it or how it all works, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
So, it's a matter of capacity, I would say, and just like figuring out what frameworks like Maui is like the most common denominator. So something that most people will need and service. That's what we'll implement, and all the rest. Yeah, you're a little bit more on your own. Um, Having that said, I don't know if that's what you're. I'm just going to keep talking. I don't know if you're going to go there, but having that said, of course, now with the power of the co-pilots and AI, we've been so effective at doing all kinds of things that we never got around to.
Sure.
None of the things that I mentioned here yet, but recently we introduced a repository, .NET/MAUI-labs, so kind of like a labs experimental thing, just because we had so much stuff that is developed so fast with the help of co-pilots, because in the past few months, we've been full on AI developing everything, and we've been very effective with that. So we've historically been a relatively small team, and now we can finally do all the things that we never really got around to. One of the things that immediately comes to mind is like, hey, people have been asking us for a Linux backend, right? Because we can do iOS, Android, Mac OS, Windows. We had Tizen there for a little bit. Linux was not on that list, but simply because if you know a little bit about Maui, every control and every property of each control, we have to map to whatever that is on a native control, right? So if you want to implement a new platform, that means we have 40 plus controls. Let's say a control on average has like 20 properties. So that means like 40 times 20 that we need to
Yeah.
map to just support one single platform. And then for Linux, okay, say which stack we need to support,
Yep.
right? Because there's a couple of them out there. So that meant a lot of work, and there is people asking for it, but not enough people
Yeah.
that are coming through our telemetry at least to kind of like justify the efforts there. Now with AI and Copilot, we can kind of like do it off the side, not entirely vibe code and don't care about the quality. We absolutely have grip on that, but there is a lot that we can do now in 5 minutes or half an hour that would take us days before, right?
Sure.
So I just merged it. We have a Linux backend coming in through that experimental stuff. So also there, like that definitely opened the door to do a lot of more stuff that we haven't been able to do before. So hopefully we can push those boundaries a little bit back and add more stuff that people have been asking us to do.
Yeah, I think that, you said something about, you know, why doesn't this work on this platform, or trying to get things to work on different platforms, right? I had this, it's funny that you were saying that, because I remembered a conversation I had with an MVP like 2 or 3 years ago. And this was at the point in time where like Maui, let's just say the tooling was still kind of work in progress, right? And there was lots of sentiment about like, okay, this is great, but I can't really do the things that I was able to do, blah blah blah. And they were complaining about how some things weren't working in Android or working in iOS or whatever. And I looked at them dead in the face and I said, "Have you ever tried, like, what?" I asked them what kind of phone they had, and they're like, "Oh, I have an Android phone." I'm like, "Have you ever tried using like an iOS phone?" And their response was, "No, why would I do that?" I'm like, "Well, if you were to use an iOS phone, would it be hard?" "Well, yeah, because I don't know it." There you go. It's because it's
Yep.
like, if you want if you want the experience to be the same across, like, what's the point of having different platforms, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, but that it was just funny because I think that a lot of people, this is not a knock on anybody, but people assume that because they have people working on something, it's just easy to implement. When sometimes there are
Yeah.
technological things that, you're talking about having a small team. You can have a triple or quadruple the size team, but the technological limitations are still there, right? You can
Yep.
add 15 more Geralds, and that's not going to fix the fact that iOS buttons render differently than Android buttons, right?
Yep.
That's just how
Exactly.
that's just how the
Yeah.
life works, right? Um, to kind of transition into like the AI stuff a little bit, right? Like you're talking about how, you know, all of the benefits that you're getting from AI to like be able to ship things faster, right? What are some of the things that you initially when AI first came out that you're like, "Oh, I could use it for this." Like what were some of the things that you immediately thought of like, "Oh, okay." And obviously that was 2 years ago. And now we're at this point where it's like, "Okay, what can't it do to an extent?" But like what were some of the like low-hanging fruit that you immediately saw that it had value in doing?
Couple of things immediately come to mind. Going back to what you were asking, like, hey, how do you keep up with the new stuff, with the AI stuff? My head was breaking at some point. I definitely had, and it's not too long ago, where I was like, I was so depressed for multiple reasons because new stuff, I think it's kind of like stabilized now, but with the AI stuff, new stuff was coming out every day. Every day. I'm not even overstating it.
Sure.
And I was like, I don't know how to keep up with this stuff. Am I getting too old for this? I don't know.
Yeah.
And I was very open to my because and then I work from home, right? So I don't see the people I work with too much, except for like in the chat or whatever. And what my mind does is like, oh no, they know everything, right? Like they're on top of this, they know what they're doing, they're figuring it out, they're going so much faster than me. I'm just slowing them down, basically. Like that's where my mind goes. Please, I hope it's better for you, but that's where my mind goes. And I was like very honest and open to them because we have an amazing team and we are able to do that. And I was like, I don't know how you guys do it. I'm not there where you are. And they're like, what are you talking about? Like we're figuring it out as we go. We have no freaking clue what we're doing. So that really helped, and they started including me left and right in some things. And before I knew it, I was up to speed, and I was like, okay, if you lean into this, then it's actually pretty awesome. But yeah, what was one of the first things? So I definitely went through a whole transition, like what you're saying, like, hey, I think kind of like the first thing that was called Copilot was like 2 years ago, maybe even
Yeah.
longer, and then it would be like in your IDE, you would type a thing and you would get like this block of gray text, and you were like, no, this is not what I want. Go away.
Like IntelliSense,
That was
like
definitely my
IntelliSense or
experience.
IntelliCode on steroids. Yeah.
Yeah, yep. So that like I was a skeptic right there and then. Was like, this is not for me. And then of course that died down, which is a whole interesting conversation and discussion on its own. A lot of people were asking me like, oh, where does this code come from? Like, what's the license on this? Am I stealing code right now? Blah blah
Yeah.
blah blah. That completely went away for some reason. I don't know why. But so and then it's not since a couple of months where I'm actually like, oh, this is actually super super useful. And I think that's also because the models and all the tools actually grew up in that time. Like it's been since November last year, I think, where we were actually picking up steam and we were like, okay, this is actually useful. To an extent we are actually more effective with all of this. So if you look at kind of like the Maui repository and the Maui team, we're applying it everywhere, right? Like the first thing that your mind goes to with AI is like code generation. Like I can generate all the code I want. I can generate Linux backends. I can do all these things. Just merge it in. Don't care about it for coding. Awesome. But we had problems with like reviewing PRs, right? Like at some point, I'm not proud of it. We had like 680 open PRs, right? And it took us several months with instructions, with skills, with custom agents to get up to a point where we are able to trust Copilot's assessment,
Sure.
Copilot's findings, to also review PRs. And we will still go over it. But one of the great examples is like we have a skill that whenever a PR comes in and that PR has the fix and a test, we will, the Copilot will undo the fix, run the test, see if the test fails, because now it should fail because the test is gone, reapply the fix, run the test again, see that it succeeds. Now you kind of like have a confidence level of like, okay, whatever this fix is doing, it seems to work. But whenever we unapply the fix and we run the test and the test succeeds, then it signals to us like, hey, I don't know what, but something fishy is going on here. It can even kind of like give you a direction of like, I think it's this and that. But at least it can tell me like, hey, something is up here without us even looking at it, right? So that's like one of the things that has been super helpful. And then again, like our GitHub issues, like they're unstructured, they're whatever. But now we can kind of like go through them, like you said, like, hey, what is the low-hanging fruit? What are the ones that are already that are duplicates? What are the ones that we can close because it's already fixed, right? So we're able to go through all of these things much faster, much easier. And one thing for me personally, like again, if you know a little bit in depth about like what MAUI does, very easily put, like we create bindings for everything that's on iOS and Android, right? So Windows we get for free because that's already C# and .NET. But for every API on iOS and every API on Android, which is like tens of thousands per platform right there, we create a counterpart on C# and .NET, which we call a binding. And that's like hard, right? That's definitely on the hard side of software engineering. So there was a library. I'm a sucker for cool animations, right? I think we all should be like especially on mobile devices. It just helps the user experience so much. And you've had the Lottie, Lottie animations for a long, long time, which is basically GIF animations plus plus. You define them in JSON. I think they're amazing. So for the longest time, that was the most popular thing. Maybe it still is. I don't know. But you also had Rive, RIVE, and I think they're the ones that are used in Duolingo. And I'm a sucker for gamification, so I'm all in on Duolingo. And those animations look amazing. And those animations, they can be interactive, and you can do all kinds of things with them. And I was like, they have like this full suite of like, of course, native libraries out there for all kinds of things, even like Flutter and whatever. And I've always been like, oh, I want to bring this to .NET MAUI, but I never found the time to do it. And now I was like at a level where actually now we're talking about it, a second example comes to mind. But I was like, I want to do this thing, but I never had the time to actually do it because the bindings are hard, et cetera, et cetera. So I never had the justification to actually do it. And now I was like, Copilot is on such a level that I can just say, I want to have this library for .NET MAUI. Here is the .NET for iOS repository. Here's the .NET for Android repository. Here's a little bit of a documentation page on how to do these bindings. Go figure it out. And it did. The plugin is out there right now. You can use it. It did it all by itself, right? Like definitely I had to put in some guardrails, say like, hey, this is not great, do this, do that, but it did it, right? So that's really cool. Another one, which was a couple of months ago, kind of along the same lines, but a little bit easier example was we had kind of like a pub sub pattern going on in Xamarin Fleet Messaging Center, what it was called. I always hated the thing, and we should never made it public. It was something we needed internally, but there we are. It was made public, and people started using it. So it's hard to get rid of it then. So with .NET MAUI, I think around .NET 8, I was like, this is deprecated, this is gone. I removed it, and then we got so much feedback from the community. I say feedback, but that's like the nice
way
word.
of saying it.
That said like, we're not ready, this should be back, and so we put it back. But then I was like, okay, I really want to take this out. So what I did was like, hey, it was wrapped in a nice interface as we do in the .NET ecosystem. So I gave it the interface definition. I gave it the unit test that we already had. And I said, I want to have this as an outside API service. Don't change anything because I want it to be drop-in compatible. So you can install this library and it should just work. But I want implementation to use the MVVM toolkit weak reference messenger, right? So that's like super performant. I don't know how to do it, but it's the same kind of like concept, but super performant, works great. And I gave it that. Actually, I gave it that somewhere early in the AI cycle. It couldn't figure it out. It was like coming up with nonsense. I
Sure.
tried a different model and I couldn't figure it out. And I got it to work manually a little bit, but then, I didn't see, it was a migration kind of like supporting project. So not super shiny, super something that people will be like, oh, this is the next cool thing. But there was still an ask for it. So later on, when the models got better, I gave it again. And sure enough, it was like running the tests, steering itself, verifying, and it figured it out eventually. So again, like a complete library that built itself, but that was
Yeah.
built by AI and just worked.
Yeah, it's funny that these tools are moving it so fast. I've noticed that maybe this is a point of, maybe something, an issue with my character, but it's like I've read release notes substantially more recently. Like, when updates to like the GitHub Copilot SDK, or, something in Cursor, like I read those release notes substantially more than I have in my entire career, because I think that in order for me to take advantage of the tooling, I have to really understand how they work. Like an example, like I
Mhm.
was I was building something using the GitHub Copilot SDK a few weeks ago, and like I built my own tool, and it was really really slow. And I was like, why is it so slow? Like, how do I figure out like what's slow about it? And I tried to figure out like how to get the telemetry wired up, and it just didn't work. And then I came to realize that it wasn't wired up yet for C Sharp. Like, and I didn't know that until I went to the repo and saw it. And then like the next day it was all implemented, and I literally like 10 lines of code and it was fixed, right? And I was able to figure out what was slow in that tool. And I guess the point is that, like, I feel like we're going down this path of we care more about the release notes and the documentation than we do about the actual
Oh yeah.
code itself, right? And that's something that I'd like to kind of finish up on, is like, you know, we're going down this path where I think the generated code, or the code that we write, is, I wouldn't say getting less important, but there are other things that are becoming more important. And I love to, talk with you as somebody, software engineer, who spent, the last 15, 20 years of your life, like writing code, type, 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 type. And now it's how you prompt, how you're educating the context of the tool, or the context of the harness or the LLM or whatever. Like, how have you kind of reconciled that? Because you're not typing anymore. Like, you're not typing for each blah
Yeah.
blah blah.
Yep. No, that's definitely part of the existential crisis that I had a little while ago with like I was trying to improve on this API for .NET MAUI, and at some point I was like, why am I doing this? Like an LLM, a Copilot figured this out in 10 seconds. Why am I making this easier for some human to use, right? And with full recognition that most other companies are not going to be at this level for the next months or years, right? So it still has value, absolutely, but to some extent, I would say. So it's definitely interesting. Like at some point, will we get to? I'm a bad visionary, right? Like I
Sure.
I mined Bitcoin very early on, and I was like, hey, this is never going to be anything, and I threw it away. So don't listen to me. I don't know where this is going, but at some point there must be a point like I don't care if this is built in C Sharp or .NET or MAUI or whatever, right? Like you have programming languages that are made up out of white space, I think, or dots and dashes. If that's what works best, please do it in that. I don't care about the code anymore, right? And we're not quite there yet, which I totally understand. But yeah, I'm not writing code. I've not had an IDE open for months, literally. Everything goes through like Copilot CLI, and we build our own tool, Polypilot, to kind of like manage multiple sessions all at once with actually the Copilot CLI SDK. But yeah, I think what you will see happening, at least for like the incoming imminent future, is a lot more CLI tools, right? Because that's super easy to kind of like use with all the agents, super easy for them to invoke with a command line operation, and very easy to kind of like understand the output that it's coming from. And now basically all the stuff that we kind of like hated is super important, right? Writing tests, super important now, because that will help the Copilot validate that everything is still working, just as it did for us. But now, you're going to trust someone else to do it. And documentation, right? Tell the LLMs, tell the Copilots how to actually do things. And how do I prompt? How do I do things? It's a little bit dependent, I feel, on what model you're using, right? Like they all have their own little character that you want to lean into. I think specifically like OpenAI ChatGPT releases a cookbook with every model. And I think for Anthropic with Claude, they kind of like release a system card or something with like, hey, this works, this doesn't work. So definitely look into that if you're talking about, I want to read the release notes and catch up with all the tooling updates. But yeah, as I kind of like alluded to earlier with the .NET MAUI repository as well, like it took us months to kind of like get our whole repository and workflow in a state where we're finally able to kind of like trust Copilot a little bit more, together with, of course, like just the improvements of the models that are coming out, to get up to a level where we're like, okay, we're confident enough for what we're trying to do, to rely on what Copilot is offering us, also in terms of like actually reviewing code and pushing that in. But yeah, it comes down to a lot of like self-verification. Make sure that it has everything to kind of like verify. Be very precise, right? Like be very don't assume that it can read your mind, almost like talking to other humans.
Yeah.
But other humans still have a little bit more context than these models, right? Like they still will go off and do a thing, and then you're like, oh no, that was not what I meant, right? And whenever you hit that, that's the moment when you think like, oh, this is something that needs to go into an instruction, right? If you have to kind of like 3 times say the same thing, then you have to be like, oh, this can go into my agents, my models instructions in the repository, and then you'll never have to deal with it again. So, that would be kind of like my takeaway here. And also with like, hey, the models that you're using today are going to be the worst models that there are right now, right? Like only going to get better from here. And the models that we have right now, at least the ones that we are using, are already pretty impressive, right? So um, I would definitely say if you're not on board with this, I'm not a doom and gloom guy. I'm usually pretty optimistic, and it's not trying to overstate or have some good quotes for the YouTube shorts in here, but definitely get on board with this,
Yeah.
because this is going to be the future, whether you believe in it right now or not, whether you want it or not. This is going to happen, and I, for one, definitely believe that this is making us so much more productive, so much more effective. And instead of being scared of it, just try to be excited about it and see what the possibilities this brings you, instead of like, what is this going to mean for my future and what do I need to do next? There's definitely in the back of my head, like, what am I going to do? Like, are the thing that my coming back full circle to the beginning of this conversation, like the conversations that I would have with my parents with like, hey, is this a good career choice? And they were like, yeah, computer's going to be forever. It's only going to be more and more and more.
Yeah.
And you're going to have people that need to do software engineering, et cetera, et cetera. And now this is the first thing that's going. Like my whole life is a lie.
Sure.
Um, but I still think that at least for the time until I retire, hopefully, there will be a need for people who, know how to work with this stuff, because this is here to stay. So be sure to be the person that knows everything about this, knows how to work with it, knows how to be that 10x developer with all of this stuff, right? And then you'll be golden. But if you don't feel productive right now through AI, then you're probably lagging behind, and that's something that you don't want to do.
I couldn't agree with any of that more. Like I think that you know, I love the sentiment is that, you know, these things are here to help, not replace. These
Yeah.
things are to augment, not replace, whatever cliche phrase you want to say. This conversation has been great. I really appreciate you kind of giving me a little bit of insight into how you kind of think about, community work and building software, and obviously right now in this AI world, like how productive it's made you, which I think it's great to hear. And for folks that are watching this, if you're not already paying attention to what Gerald is doing, which you probably are, because I mean, he's got a silver play button in his house. So, but if you want, you can follow him on social media. Um, Jay Versluis, right? No, that wasn't even close. No, not close.
Yeah.
No, that was a bad
I
one.
again, if I knew if I that I was going to be doing these things, then I should have picked a better handle.
Verslau,
It's my no, it's Versluis. JF
Versluis,
Versluis.
Versluis. All right. Yeah. So
It's my
that's
initials, John
yeah,
Fitzgerald, if that makes
yeah.
it easier to remember.
Yeah. So, but I'll spell it out for people. So, that's
Perfect.
JFVERSLUIS. And there'll be some links to all the different places that Gerald's at in the show notes. And this has been great. So, before we sign off, do you have any parting words, my friend?
Oh my goodness, putting me on the spot. No, I just that's what brought me the most. I again, like I'm not complaining, but I could have probably been further in my career and everything if I jumped on the right things. But instead, I've always been doing what I enjoy the most, what I love the most, and that still brought me a lot of this and a lot of happiness in my life. And sure, I'm busy. I do a lot of stuff. I get tired some days, but most of the time I'm out there doing all these things, talking to amazing people like Isaac out here on my free evenings, just because I love what I do and it doesn't really feel like work at all. So find something that you love doing. If you're in that position, I think you're a very lucky person, and I'm always here to help. If you're like, hey, I could, use a little bit of life advice. Again, I'm not a visionary, but I'm always happy to talk, give you my thoughts. And I hope this was enjoyable. Um, and I'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, and again, thank you so much. I know that it's getting late there in the Netherlands, so I want to thank you for, giving your evening to me, and I want to thank the folks for watching this live with us and the folks that are listening in the future. So my name is Isaac Levin. This has been Coffee and Open Source. If you like this episode, be sure to let me know and share it with your friends. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. For my friend Gerald, take care.